Payton Soicher, rankingsrightnow.com. Payton, full disclosure, I forgot to send your graphics to Garrett, so we're going to have to wing it a little bit here on what you're doing. But you guys, and I'll put the link in the chat, you had a nice week at Rankings Right Now. You did all right in your predictive models. What was the thing that kind of stood out to you the most week one?
Well, two things. One is week 2 by far is the hardest. It's a nightmare to predict because you don't know 26 beyond, right? It's a black hole. You can get a little bit of a feel for it. So, Georgia Tech kind of snuck in there late, which is cool because they beat Florida State. And then I'm curious now on what people's thoughts and opinions are on Georgia Tech now that Florida State had the kind of mishap against Boston College. So that was one thing that kind of stood out to me. But Miami got a lot of love from the AP poll. That was our big miss. Our AP poll or our predictive model, I think, had them maybe in the 16, 17, 18 range, and they were higher than that. And that was what really screwed up our algorithm. That was the big miss. So Cam Ward is looking really nice down there, and I think a lot of people are feeling into that. So we'll see in the future if they're going to get as much love in the future with how Florida also turns out, and see how kind of that all feels out. But those were the two things that kind of stood out to me.
Yeah, I don't know if at the end of the season that's going to feel like a big win.
Right. I don't know.
They'll just get their little like SEC participation, like congratulations, you beat an SEC team at their place, like little sticker. And for the ACC, the Big 12, the only guarantee into this thing is to win it. As where in the other conferences, have 10 wins and you're probably going to be in the playoff unless there's 4 or 5 of you with 10 wins. And even then, like only one of you is probably going to feel the burn of that.
Correct. And no one's even really paid attention to that before. Like, has anyone ever paid attention to the final rankings of who's usually 8, 9, and 10? No one's ever looked. I mean, I don't think I look at rankings all day long. It's an unhealthy obsession. And I still don't think I've looked at those rankings at last year's. Like, it will be very interesting on how that changes this year.
One of the things that you guys do is you have the projected scores for the week. How close did you get on those last week?
You know what? So the projected scores we don't actually take into account. We take those from Vegas sportsbooks.
Okay.
So that's what the public is thinking, and it makes it a little bit more interesting. And from a user engagement perspective, you want to know what everyone's kind of betting on. So we take the over under and we do a couple of calculations in there. We look at the over under, we look at the spread, and then we kind of make those calculations there. Sometimes we have the data, sometimes we don't. But for the most part, we kind of take all of that into account, and then we really let that kind of be the guiding factor going into the game. Once the game starts, we let that score dictate it the rest of the way and kind of give it that right now feel.
What are your biggest swing games this week that you think will affect things?
Obviously, Texas and Michigan is the big one. One of the fun things that when I was playing around with it this morning, was if Texas can really give it to Michigan and Georgia does not impress against Tennessee Tech, it's showing that Texas is going to be the number 1 seed at the end of the week, which I think that it's reasonable. If Georgia can really put the beating down on Tennessee Tech and show them that what we saw last week with Oregon and with Michigan on schools that probably shouldn't have been competing with them late. Oregon slipped a couple slots because they weren't impressive against Idaho. So I think if they really can show, hey, with a school that should not be on the same field as us, to be honest, if we can put them away early and let everyone know that we're someone who should not be dealt with lightly, they're going to stay at that number 1 seed. But that's the big one right now. If Texas loses at Michigan, we have Texas falling down to 11 and Michigan climbing up to 6. So that's the big swing one right there. And then you have NC State and who are they playing again?
Tennessee.
Right now, what's interesting about that one is Tennessee is not projected to move if they win. And that's because everyone else above them are playing just layover teams, it seems like. LSU's playing Nichols. Like, I had to search up where Nichols was. I'd never heard of it before.
Also in Louisiana.
Are they?
Yeah.
Like, I had a friend said, I think they're in Massachusetts. Like, it's such a crazy matchup, right? So we have that situation where if Tennessee wins, they're not going to move. NC State falls out of the top 25. If NC State wins, then I think they get brought up to about 17, and our model has Tennessee falling out of the top 25. They fall out to about 29. So they'll receive a couple of AP votes, but I don't think they're in the top 25. That's at least what the model is. And as I kind of mentioned, week 2 projections are the hardest. The next hardest is week 3. Once we start to get week 4, week 5, we have like real substantial data that we can start to back on, and things can start to look fishy. That one looks a little bit fishy to me. I expect them to be probably in that 20 to 25 range, but who knows? They might drop out completely.
All right, I'm going to give you guys some fun facts on Nicholls State.
Please.
It is part of the University of Louisiana system. Not only is it in Louisiana, Peyton, and I had to verify this. I thought it was. It's in the most Louisiana place in Louisiana. It's in Thibodaux, which is deep Louisiana. Like that is there is a less than 20% chance that you will walk into a restaurant in Thibodaux, Louisiana, and understand everything the waitress says to you. Like it's that kind of Louisiana. Also, a 98% acceptance rate and a 46% graduation rate. So that's a gap they've got to fill there. So they'll let you in knowing there's a 50-50 shot. You're not going to make it. But that's Nicholls State there. Oklahoma State and Arkansas is one of my favorite games of the week, projected with 36-26 from the Vegas odds. That one obviously will do more damage to Oklahoma State than it would benefit Arkansas, wouldn't it? I
don't have Oklahoma State moving in the rankings after this week either. Same thing. Arkansas, give me a score. What do you think if Arkansas upsets that game? What happens?
I think it would be in the 34-31 kind of a
34-31. Here we go. Let's see what happens. So I'm just going to rankings right now. I'm going to the what if simulator. I'm adjusting the score, and just like that, I get the feedback. So if that happens, we have Oklahoma State at number 31 out of the AP top 25 if they lose to Arkansas. What's interesting about that one as well, and I can also look at all teams to find where Arkansas climbs up to 28. So they are right on that edge too. So yeah, Arkansas has a lot more to gain than where we were just looking at again.
Oklahoma State.
Oklahoma. Sorry, way too many games today. Yes. Oklahoma State has everything to lose versus Arkansas going into this weekend.
So you said again, week 2 is the hardest to predict because week 1, and you're in this part right now where everybody's they're kind of at extremes of the schedule. They're either playing a pretty difficult non-conference game or they're playing, a guarantee game.
Right.
And so that's really hard to predict. So how do you, are you looking forward, at least does it simplify after this week as they start to see more and more conference games and you can kind of get maybe a more realistic look about where the river is flowing?
Yes. And our algorithm takes into account that conference games are an effective way of measuring these predictions. So when you start to get into that conference setup, you can't run anymore. These big teams can't play Nicholls. You can't do it. You're going to have to play some SEC school. So it's legitimate. We know who should be playing who. Our algorithms take this into account. And now we are not left into the dark of, is Boston College legit? Are these teams that put up a good fight early? Is Fresno State legit? Is Michigan legit? We don't really know because there's no context to go after. If you remember a couple years ago, LSU had Leonard Fournette and they just ran through everybody the first 8 games. I want to say they were 8-0. And I don't think they won a game after that. So it's really tough in those early games to get a good gauge of exactly who you're playing and how dominant you really are. As we start to get to 4 and 5, we start to understand a little bit more of who the AP poll is actually taking a little bit more seriously by the way they move teams inside and out of their rankings. So that also helps a lot. And, our model is completely based off of this model, by the way, this model that's looking at the AP poll. We have another one that's kind of sitting off in the corner right now that predicts the College Football Selection Committee. And it makes very early predictions on that are hilarious to look at. No one would ever believe it. but it starts to gain momentum and a little bit of traction as you start to as we start to get into those later weeks. We get a little bit more feel of, okay, now we know when this team is playing this team, that's a real movement that we're expecting to happen, because they both solidified their place in the college football rankings across the spectrum, not even in the top 25.
I can't wait to see the college football playoff predictor one when you roll that one out. I'm curious, because that one takes into account a lot more of unpredictable factors. Like, you don't know, like, we don't know each year, especially now with 12, we don't know what the kind of nonsense excuse for someone who's left out is, right? Because you don't know that. So, sometimes it's travel time, or there's all these like metrics that they throw out, like, well, these teams had the exact same record and a pretty similar sense of strength of schedule. It's, within the margin of error, so to speak. But this team had 2 offensive linemen injured, and this team didn't. And you're like, well, I can't, like, how do you mathematically insert information like that?
I'll let you know when I figure it out.
Yeah,
like, it's just too much information to try and track. Like, you could go into the injury reserves. You could try and figure out who's the next person that's going to be filling in, and where was their recruit. But at the end of the day, it's human eyeballs that are watching this, right? We can try and extract as much as we can, but it's human eyeballs that can make a pretty quick assumption of, like, do they have it or do they not? So if they're still semi-competitive, and really what I think we as fans really do is we really grasp onto those superstar players, and that's why the Florida State one hurt so bad last year, is because it was their superstar, right? You could have a left guard that goes out, you could have your second best wide receiver pull a hammy. You should still be okay. When you have the really core guy and you can visually see, oh my gosh, this is falling apart, without some offensive line analyst on Twitter diving into how this person's footwork is so much better than the replacement because it's hurt. Like, it's just a feel for it. So we don't have anything right now that really steps in and fills that gap. What we're just trying to do is say, typically when you see this score at this weekend at point in time, with 2 teams with these records in these conferences going head to head, this is what will actually change the trajectory of how people's opinions of those rankings count. By the way, if you want to have fun for 3 seconds, sure. I just pulled up the college football committee's rankings for week 3. So what's fun about this is no one can vet me on this. There's no one that's going to come out, but it looks pretty legit going into the next week. So week 3 projected rankings, which is the funny thing about rankings right now, because we're projecting week 3 and we haven't even started week 2. The projected week 3 rankings, if everything goes according to plan, which it never does: Texas 1, Georgia 2, Ohio State 3, Bama 4, Ole Miss 5, Notre Dame 6, Oregon 7, Penn State 8. So not too much different than what you see right now. But what's really interesting that I'm looking at right now is Georgia Tech is at 34. They do not think that they do not think it's all made up right now. But Georgia Tech is not sitting in that top 25. They do not respect that Florida State win at the current moment. It looks like they're going to have to prove themselves a little bit more.
The Skynet Council, the committee that he's got going there, doesn't think so. But I mean, look, this is the best you can, because last year it came down to, we're not leaving the SEC out. Like, that's what it came down to, and Jordan Travis. Right. But like the thing they told everybody was Jordan Travis, because that was the thing they could kind of anchor around.
Hold on to it. Yes.
Yeah. As opposed to, are we really going to do this without the SEC? And that was the reason. Greg Sankey I feel like he just sent them all a text and said no. Well, there you go. That's what you know. That's what you know. Payton Soicher with us here. Rankings right now. Go to the website, create an account. You can, like, this is one of those things that is it's a great time waster. For sure.
Oh, for sure.
And it's, you can go into 100 different what if simulations. You can do it. It's fantastic. Rankingsrightnow.com. Payton Soicher with us, and he'll be with us throughout the season. Payton, thank you so much. I'll talk to you again soon, buddy.
Thanks for having me. See you again.